This is Russell Burrell. He is smiling here at the families of his victims before being sentenced to 6 life sentences. In 2012, he was one of 4 men who together planned to rob money and illegal checks from this man, Michael Martin.
Cameras everywhere. My child is watching.
Behind teenage faces and youthful charm lies a darker truth. Some teens don't grow up, they snap. From Russell Burrell's cold-blooded stabbings to Christie, Parisien, and Jaslyn Smith's deadly shootouts, these 5 young killers committed brutal crimes that shocked entire communities. Let's begin.
Upon realizing that Miss Barros was present in the apartment, Russell Burrell pointed the gun at her and fired it, striking and killing Shamika Barros.
In July 2012, a home in Providence, Rhode Island became the scene of something truly tragic. 3 people, Michael Martin, Shamika Barros, and Damian Colon, were brutally killed. And the person behind it all wasn't a hardened criminal or a stranger hiding in the shadows. It was a 16-year-old Russell Burrell. Russell had once been described as a skinny, frail, and picked-on teen. But everything changed when he started carrying a gun. He thought it gave him power, respect, and protection. But what it brought was pain, destruction, and death. Along with 3 other teens, he planned a robbery. Their target was Michael Martin, a man they believed was vulnerable and had substantial wealth and assets they wanted to steal.
Allowing him to be tried as an adult for the murders. Friday, another suspect, 16-year-old Quandell husband, was also charged as an adult.
Russell wasn't acting alone. He teamed up with Quandell husband, Timothy DeBrito, and Donovan Hall. DeBrito provided the 9mm Glock pistol, and Russell was chosen to carry it. On the night of the robbery, the group wore black hoodies. They knocked on Martin's window. When Martin let them in, he had no idea he was letting in his killers. In just moments, Russell pulled out the gun, shot Martin in the stomach, then turned and shot Colon and Barros as well. After the murders, the teens fled, taking only 2 small bags of substance. The case shocked the community. What began as a robbery for a couple of dollars worth of substance ended in a triple homicide. Investigators worked quickly and eventually charged all 4 teens. Russell, who admitted to pulling the trigger, was only 16 at the time, but that didn't stop justice from catching up to him.
And that Russell Burrell started firing a 9mm Glock handgun.
According to testimonies, Hall had chosen Martin as the target because he thought he was easy to rob. Russell, on the other hand, was seeking respect. He believed that carrying a gun would make him stronger and finally earn him the reputation he thought he needed to survive. But what he did was destroy 3 innocent lives. Years later in court, 19-year-old Russell Burrell stood silently as he received 4 consecutive life sentences, plus 10 more years. However, he showed no regret for his actions. The judge called him a cold-blooded, pitiless slayer. Burrell's request for leniency was denied. He had tried to blame his actions on childhood trauma and life on the streets, but the court saw right through it. Assistant Attorney General Randall White, during his final case before retirement, struggled to hold back tears as he spoke about the victims. These were real people with families, dreams, and futures. And all of it was stolen in seconds by a teenager who thought a gun would change his life. It did, just not in the way he expected. Our next case shows how a moment of rage on the road turned deadly.
Walked up in here, you're talking to my partner, calling him bro. He's over twice your age.
I was like, what do you do? He was trying, he wouldn't go by me. He just kept riding my...
On a calm fall evening in West Michigan, 2 strangers crossed paths on the road. One was a teenager on a dirt bike. The other, a 64-year-old retiree driving home from a peaceful fishing trip. What should have been a typical evening turned into a deadly encounter that shocked the entire community. 19-year-old Christian Hillman was riding his dirt bike along Whitneyville Avenue Southeast, just outside Grand Rapids. It was after sunset. Behind him, driving a pickup truck, was William Andy McFarland. He was a retired General Motors worker and a respected member of his neighborhood. McFarland began flashing his bright headlights. Then he started honking his horn. Christian, likely frustrated, pulled into a nearby church parking lot. Tensions started rising between the two, but instead of continuing on his way, McFarland followed him in. That decision would change everything.
And there was a thorough ass beating after that. Honestly, I feel like I was in self-defense.
What happened next was pieced together by eyewitnesses and investigators. Words were exchanged. Then conflict erupted. Christian attacked Andy with his fists and feet. Witnesses said the teen did not stop. He kept kicking Andy, even after he collapsed beside his pickup. Andy suffered a fractured skull, several broken facial bones, and fractured ribs. He was rushed to the hospital, but doctors gave him little chance of survival. Nearly 5 weeks later, on October 31st, 2022, Andy died from his injuries. At first, Christian was only charged with assault, but after Andy passed away, the charge was upgraded to second-degree murder. Christian's defense team called it a tragic accident. They claimed that Andy had followed him, that Christian had been provoked, and that Andy had even grabbed him by the neck. But the prosecution pushed back hard. They said this was not a moment of panic. It was rage, pure, uncontrolled rage. They argued that Christian had a chance to walk away. Instead, he chose to continue the attack long after Andy had fallen. That was not self-defense. That was murder. The motive was a split-second burst of anger, misunderstanding, or road rage. That's what the prosecution argued. They reminded the jury that getting angry behind the wheel does not give anyone the right to take a life. Showing leniency to Christian, they said, would send the wrong message, that violent outbursts can somehow be justified. In the end, the jury agreed. Christian Hillman was found guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 22.5 to 100 years in prison. Yet he showed no emotion as the verdict was read. A sentence that ensures he will spend a good portion of his life behind bars. Outside the courtroom, there were no celebrations, just grief. Andy's family mourned the loss of a kind and loving man who should have come home that night. Christian's loved ones wept too for a young man who made a terrible choice that ended in tragedy. Our next case is a pure nightmare, where a son is accused of killing his parents.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Antonio Armstrong Jr., guilty of capital murder as charged in the indictment.
On a summer night in 2016, the peace of a Houston neighborhood was shattered forever. Inside a quiet townhome, two loving parents named Antonio and Dawn Armstrong were shot in the head as they slept. Their 16-year-old son, A.J. Armstrong Jr., was the only other person inside the house. Soon, he would be accused of committing the unthinkable, killing his parents. At first, the case seemed complicated. There were no signs of forced entry. The weapon, a .22 caliber pistol, belonged to A.J.'s father. And as police dug deeper, all fingers began to point at the teenager. The evidence against A.J. was serious. A speck of his father's blood was found under a name tag placed on A.J.'s clothes when police took him in for questioning. That tiny detail was introduced by a crime scene expert named Celestina Rossi, who claimed it proved A.J. was at the crime scene during the murder. This key piece of evidence was not shown in the first two trials. It was new, and it played a major role in convincing the jury. He was arrested and charged with capital murder. However, something strange happened. His first trial ended in a hung jury. The second trial also ended in the same way. It wasn't until the third trial, years later, that a guilty verdict finally came. Tears welled up in his eyes as the verdict was read. At age 24, A.J. Armstrong was sentenced to life in prison with the eligibility of parole after 40 years. The original motive behind the killing was family tension, discipline, and rebellion. But A.J. always claimed he was innocent, and now he's pushing harder than ever to prove it. Just months after the conviction, a dramatic twist happened. A.J.'s legal team received a letter. It said the case was connected to a forensic analyst named Rochelle Austin, who had just been fired for doing faulty lab work. She was accused of mixing up DNA samples, breaking protocol, and showing a complete lack of attention to detail. A.J.'s attorney, Patrick McCann, believes this new revelation could have changed everything. His lawyer argues that if the defense had known about Austin's mistakes during the trial, they could have questioned the integrity of the DNA evidence to prevent a guilty verdict.
And Antonio were shown AJ put his head in his hands, shaking and crying.
So far, the judge has refused to grant a fourth trial. But AJ's defense team has not stopped fighting. They've asked the Court of Criminal Appeals to pause his current appeal and send the case back for a special hearing to explore whether this faulty analyst impacted the outcome of his trial. They also believe the testimony from crime scene expert Rossi should be reevaluated, especially because she had already faced past complaints in another case. This case is emotional from every side. Two parents, Dawn and Antonio Sr., were brutally killed. A teenager, now a grown man, is serving life in prison while still insisting he is innocent. And now, serious concerns are being raised about the very system that put him behind bars. Our next case takes us to a night when a young life was senselessly cut short.
But the truth is, the night of June 26, 2015, Isaias Madrid killed my happiness. He took my other half.
Please show our community and these repeat offenders that enough is enough.
On a summer night in 2015, a simple get-together turned into a nightmare. 17-year-old Jaden Chavez Silver was at a friend's house in northeast Albuquerque. The teens were just hanging out, talking, laughing, enjoying a quiet evening. Jaden wasn't causing any trouble. He wasn't involved in any gang activity or crime. He was simply spending time with friends. But everything changed in an instant. A car pulled up outside the house. Gunshots rang out. Jaden was hit in the chest during the drive-by shooting. His friends rushed to help him, but it was too late. At first, no one understood why this happened. Jaden had no enemies. He came from a loving family, had a bright future ahead of him, and was deeply loved by those who knew him. It didn't make sense that someone would target him. But someone had taken his life, and the police were determined to find out who was responsible. Officers launched a full-scale investigation. They spoke with witnesses, collected surveillance footage, and followed every possible lead. After months of hard work, detectives identified a suspect, Isaias Madrid, a 17-year-old the same age as Jaden. But the case didn't stop there. Investigators learned that Madrid had taken another life just 6 months after Jaden's death. This time, after a beer pong game turned into a deadly argument. 2 murders, 2 innocent lives lost, and 1 teenager is responsible for both. In 2017, Madrid was convicted of killing Jaden Chavez Silver and sentenced to life in prison. He also received an additional 16 years for a second killing. Despite the severity of the crimes, he showed no remorse. Still, his legal team continued to fight. They argued that a life sentence was too extreme for someone so young. They claimed Madrid had matured behind bars, that he had changed, felt remorse, and deserved a second chance.
Intentions were to see the guy who jumped down it. I was gonna knock, and then I was gonna shoot at him.
With that, they petitioned the court to reduce his sentence. During the hearing, Madrid blamed gang activity for the atrocity, but he never took full responsibility. Jaden's mother, Nicole Chavez, wasn't convinced. She had even received a photo of Madrid in prison, posing and throwing up gang signs. To me, is he remorseful? Not, she said. The judge agreed. I don't necessarily find that he suddenly had remorse over the death of Jaden, the judge stated firmly.
And I'm going to ask you to consider and ask yourself, how many lies and inconsistencies are you willing to stomach?
Madrid's request for a shorter sentence was denied. The court found no reason to believe he had changed, and he remains behind bars, with no early release in sight.
I believe Jaden deserves better justice than this just time served.
For Jaden's mother, Nicole, closure still feels out of reach. She believes justice won't truly be served until Madrid completes every year of his 39-year sentence. For killing 2 different people, and then one day getting to walk free, that's not fair, she said. And that's when I'll finally feel that justice has been done. Our next case shows a deadly high school drama where jealousy turned lethal.
I watch. Do you know how much truth, crime I watch? You can't get away with nothing.
It started like any other high school drama of teenage love, jealousy, and heartbreak. But no one could have imagined how far it would go. In October 2021, 18-year-old Dwight DJ Grant, a bright student from Miramar High School, suddenly vanished. He was a senior, just weeks away from graduation. But within 48 hours, his story would take a dark and deadly turn. When DJ first went missing, no one could have imagined that his classmates were involved. But beneath the surface of high school drama lay a dark and twisted motive. Wrapped in jealousy and revenge, the truth slowly unraveled. 3 teenagers, Christie Parisien, Jaslyn Smith, and Andre D. Clements III, had allegedly been plotting DJ's murder. Why? Because Andre believed DJ had been with his ex-girlfriend, and that belief ignited a fury in him that refused to fade. In a series of shocking text messages just days before the crime, Andre wrote, "Murder will happen soon. It'll be bloody. Help me kill him." Detectives began their investigation, and what they uncovered was deeply disturbing. Security footage showed Christie luring DJ toward a stairwell under false pretenses. Waiting there were Andre and Jaslyn. What happened next turned deadly. Authorities later said the weapon used resembled a sword. After the brutal attack, the teens dragged the body and hid it behind nearby bushes. In a desperate attempt to cover their tracks, they used cleaning supplies and even started a small fire to destroy the evidence.
Christie Parisien and Jaslyn Smith all entered not guilty pleas in the murder of Dwight Grant.
By November 5, 2021, all three were charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and conspiracy to commit murder. But what made this case even more disturbing was that they weren't strangers. They were DJ's classmates, teens who laughed in the same hallways and sat in the same classrooms. The motive was as chilling as it was senseless. Andre viewed DJ as a romantic rival. He couldn't stand the thought that his ex might have moved on, so instead of walking away, he turned deadly. And two others followed him down that dark path.
Lured him out of his apartment with the promise of leading him right to Andre Clements and Jaslyn Smith, who police say stabbed him to death.
On August 9, 2023, nearly 2 years later, Christie and Jaslyn, now both adults, stood before a judge and pleaded guilty. They were each sentenced to 25 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. Their former friend, Andre Clements, is still awaiting trial, set for January 2025. He's trying to represent himself in court, writing his legal motions and challenging the charges. This wasn't just a typical high school breakup. It was a carefully planned act that ended the life of a young man with a bright future ahead of him. Our next case involves a teenager who didn't just rebel. Nicholas Browning murdered his entire family, then went to hang out with friends like nothing happened.
A familiar face urged forgiveness for the 15-year-old accused of murdering his parents and younger brothers.
6 years after he methodically moved through his Cockeysville home, murdering his parents and two younger brothers, Nicholas Browning made a bid to get his multiple life sentences.
Nicholas Browning was born in Cockeysville, Maryland, a suburb of Baltimore. He was raised in a loving household with his parents, John and Tamara, and his younger brothers, Gregory and Benjamin. Tamara was a stay-at-home mom, while John was an attorney. The Browning family seemed to embody the American dream to the outside world.
His attempt to show remorse any more than the judge who denied his motion. Coffin says he planned the murders like a professional hitman.
Growing up, Nicholas was an honor student and Boy Scout. He excelled in academics and extracurricular activities, playing varsity golf and lacrosse at Delaney High School. But as time went on, dark clouds began to form behind his seemingly perfect facade.
The sight drove home the loss of 11-year-old Ben Browning and his 14-year-old brother Greg. Police say older brother Nick killed both boys in their Cockeysville home Friday night.
On February 1, 2008, 1 week before Nicholas turned 16, tragedy struck. Nicholas was supposed to be sleeping over at a friend's house, but instead, he snuck out of the house in the middle of the night. Little did he know he was about to embark on a horrifying journey that would forever change his life.
Why would I jeopardize? You put money into it. I have a very large, or had to have whatever, inheritance coming to me, regardless if there's insurance money involved or not.
Upon returning home, Nicholas used one of his father's guns to carry out a heinous crime. Without hesitation, he shot and killed his mother, father, and two brothers. 2 days later, Nicholas confessed to the horrific crimes. He was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, denying him bail. The details of his confession painted a disturbing picture of a family plagued by abuse and violence. Nicholas claimed that his father, John, had physically and sexually abused him for years, leaving him emotionally and physically scarred.
They arrived on scene and located all 4 members of the family inside the home. Nicholas's father and prominent real estate lawyer of the firm Royston, Mueller, McLean, and Reed.
However, the prosecution had a different theory. The prosecution alleged that Nicholas committed these murders to gain control over his life and exert dominance over his family. They argued that Nicholas killed his parents because he didn't want anyone telling him what to do, and that his decision to shoot his brothers was motivated by his desire to secure the entire inheritance for himself.
The same teen who murdered his entire family.
One would need to look, of course, at the person, what he was then and what he's become now.
As the trial unfolded, several members of Nicholas's loved ones, including his grandfather, pleaded for leniency. The family claimed that Nicholas was the victim of physical and mental abuse and that his actions were a result of years of suffering. They argued that Nicholas should be given a chance to reform and rehabilitate rather than face the harshest possible punishment.
Why would I jeopardize? You put money into it. I have a very large, or had to have whatever, inheritance coming to me, regardless if there's insurance money involved or not.
After intense negotiations, the prosecution and defense teams finally reached a plea deal. In January 2009, Nicholas pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to 4 life terms in prison, with 2 life terms to be served consecutively. Under the terms of the agreement, Nicholas would be eligible for parole in 2031 after serving 23 years of his sentence.
Then fly it over prison fences and into the prison yard where it would be collected by another inmate.
Despite his guilty plea, Nicholas attempted to appeal for a sentence reduction in 2014. However, the courts denied his request. Today, Nicholas is serving his sentence at Cumberland, Maryland's Western Correctional Institution. Next, we examine the chilling case of Caden Smith, a teen killer who unleashed a wave of violence, leaving devastation in his path.
Detectives also obtained this photo from early November of what police say appears to be Smith holding a handgun and a GPS monitor around his ankle.
Charges in the shooting on the south side of Indianapolis. A Metro police officer found the bodies of 3 men in October of 2021, including Michael James Jr., who you see right here in these pictures.
On October 21, 2018, 18-year-old Joseph Thomas, 22-year-old Michael James, and 17-year-old Abdullah Mubarak were found shot dead inside a vehicle in a grassy area near I-465. This triple homicide sent shockwaves through the city, with fears that a serial killer was on the loose. However, these theories were quickly debunked, and the prime suspect in the investigation became 16-year-old Caden Smith, a friend of the deceased young men.
That this is a dangerous individual and he belongs in jail.
As she prepares for another holiday without her son, she's hoping this time Smith will remain in jail.
Joseph Thomas's mother told police investigators that her son had mentioned plans to meet with his friend Caden before he left home. This revelation sparked suspicion and led the investigators to focus on Caden as a potential suspect. Upon examining Caden's electronic devices, a search on his cell phone for homicide attorney cost was discovered. The searches raised even more red flags about Caden.
An arrest Smith in the weeks after the killing was faulty, and the evidence has been tossed out, much to the dismay of the families of Joseph Thomas and Michael James.
Through meticulous investigation, it was evident that Caden Smith had planned this heinous crime meticulously. He lured his victims to a secluded area near the interstate, promising to show them a gun conversion device known as a Glock switch. Little did they know, Caden had sinister intentions.
Shootings happened along a path near Meridian Street and 465 on the south side. They say victims after showing them how to use a gun.
Caden took the 3 men there under the pretense that he was going to demonstrate this lock switch, which he claimed would enable a semi-automatic to fire like a machine gun. However, what unfolded that night was cold-blooded murder. Despite the setbacks, the investigation ultimately leads to Caden Smith's arrest. When taken into custody, police found a Glock in his possession. After conducting a thorough examination, it was determined to be the murder weapon. The evidence was undeniable.
Charged with killing 3 people found near Southern Plaza a year ago is on electronic monitoring tonight at home. A judge ordered Caden Smith to be released on bond.
His defense team managed to persuade a judge to throw out crucial evidence, including cell phones and drugs. They argued that the search warrant was invalid and yielded little to no evidence connecting him to the triple homicide.
Caden Smith killed Michael James, Abdullah Mubarak, and Joseph Thomas. They say he was 16 years old at the time he was charged as an adult.
The trial finally began on August 19, 2024, more than 3 years after Caden's initial arrest. After a grueling 5-day trial, Caden was found guilty of 3 counts of murder, 2 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of robbery, and multiple drug and gun-related offenses. On September 17, 2024, 1 month after the trial, Caden was sentenced to 189 years in prison by a Marion County judge. Prosecutor Ryan Mears, speaking on behalf of the prosecution, stated that justice had been served for the 3 victims. Mears emphasized the significant sentence imposed by the judge, calling it a testament to holding violent individuals accountable for their actions. Caden Smith's tragic and violent actions shocked those who knew him, but the next case takes us into the chilling world of a young mind gone dangerously astray. Michael Hernandez, a teenager whose brutal crime against his best friend revealed a darkness lurking beneath the surface.
Was being treated for bipolar disorder and schizophrenia.
And I wanted to apologize to his family, to his mother and his father, because I didn't always feel this way. I'm sorry for what I did to him, and it hurts me how senseless it was, because he was always such a good friend to me. And I wanted to apologize to his family.
14-year-old Michael Hernandez had a passion for heavy metal music and horror movies, which, while not uncommon among teenagers, was where the similarities between him and countless others ended. What Michael confessed to his childhood best friend, 13-year-old Andre Martin, in the summer of 2003 was disturbing. He shared with Andre his desire to become a serial killer, stating that he was studying murderers' mental illnesses. At the time, Andre believed the comment to be in jest and had no cause for concern. Little did he know that Michael was planning a deadly assault against him and their other friend, 13-year-old Jaime Goff.
Today is not about how this young man passed away, but instead it is a celebration of how he lived and the lasting impression that he made on our community.
Andre Martin is all grown up. He's a Miami-Dade cop.
On February 2, 2004, Michael made his move on Andre. The two teens met in the Southwood Middle School teachers' parking lot, where they were not allowed inside without a teacher present. However, Michael and Andre disregarded this rule and made their way inside.
You're listening to the voice of convicted killer Michael Hernandez talking on the phone from jail.
Once they were inside the building, Michael Hernandez lured Andre into the second-floor bathroom and tried to get him into a stall with him. Although they had often snuck into the school before hours, Andre later said something about this day seemed different. It was a warm day outside, but Michael was dressed in a windbreaker, raising suspicions in Andre's mind. This unusual behavior caught Andre off guard, and he couldn't help but wonder what was behind Michael's strange attire.
Prosecutors will argue he should spend the rest of his life in prison.
As they entered the bathroom, an even more bizarre event took place. Michael put on a hat, adding to the mystery surrounding his intentions. Andre was puzzled, but he wasn't sure if this strange behavior was a sign of danger or simply a whim on Michael's part. Just when Andre was about to decide whether he would follow Michael into the stall, the bell rang, signaling the start of the school day. Andre quickly left the bathroom.
With that being said, nothing comes in the way of the bittersweet memories he has of Jaime Goff. His best friend was murdered.
Despite the failed attempt on February 2nd, Michael remained undeterred. His determination to kill was unwavering. The following day, on February 3rd, Michael, dressed in his windbreaker and equipped with a hat and latex gloves, lured Jaime Goff into the bathroom, ensuring they were alone.
For the stabbing death of Jaime Goff in the bathroom of Southwood Middle School. At the time, both he and the victim were 14 years old.
Inside the bathroom, Michael's true intentions were revealed. With Jaime facing away, he pulled out a 4-inch serrated blade. As Jaime turned around, he realized that his life was in danger. Michael, fueled by rage and cruelty, covered Jaime's mouth with his hand. Unable to escape, Jaime futilely waved his hands at the blade, slicing open his hands. In an act of unimaginable brutality, Michael raised the knife and repeatedly sliced Jaime's throat, cutting his windpipe and jugular.
Jaime Goff was stabbed to death in a bathroom stall at Southwood Middle School. His classmate Michael Hernandez confessed to stashing the knife in a backpack.
The horrifying scene continued as Michael used his knife to poke into Jaime's face and head, ensuring that he was indeed dead. Satisfied with the outcome, Michael disposed of one pair of gloves down the toilet and donned another. He then washed the blood from his hands, jacket, and even his face in the sink. Blood was splattered across the floor and stall, and the body of Jaime lay lifeless on the ground.
For his resentencing hearing, his attorney, Manny Hernandez, guiding him through that first part of testimony.
Authorities were immediately notified of the murder, and an intense investigation was launched. The focus quickly shifted to Michael Hernandez, who was identified as a prime suspect. After Michael was taken to the police department, he waived his Miranda rights and confessed to murdering Jaime and trying to kill Andre one day earlier.
From his father today, also several jailhouse calls made between he and his father, where his father actually plays music that he requests for him.
Michael was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, one for the brutal killing of Jaime and the other for attempting to take the life of Andre just one day earlier. One of the key aspects of Michael's case was the conflicting expert opinions surrounding his competency to stand trial. A court-appointed expert testified that Michael did not have a mental illness that should impact his competency. However, the defense hired a psych who claimed that Michael did have symptoms that indicated he had paranoid schizophrenia.
As Jaime Goff's family and also to another friend of his who he had planned to kill the day before Goff died.
During the trial, the defense did their best to prove Michael's insanity at the time of the crime. They presented evidence, including witness testimony and medical records, to support their claim that Michael was mentally unstable at the time of the offenses. However, despite their efforts, the jurors ultimately found Michael guilty of murder and attempted murder.
Yes, sir. I mean, you talk about serial killers? Yes, sir. You talk about violence? Yes, sir. Why?
Miami-Dade Circuit Judge John Schlesinger delivered the final judgment, sentencing Michael to life in prison without parole, the maximum punishment available. Judge Schlesinger also imposed an additional 30 years for the attempted murder of Andre Martin. bringing the total sentence to a staggering 30 years to life.
A female over the phone. So I didn't know what to talk about. My life as being, incarcerated, it's very mundane. So I tried to think about.
By taking the life of a close friend and leaving Jaime alone to die, Michael shattered the lives of not only his own family, but the entire Goff family as well. Jorge Goff, Jaime's father, expressed deep sorrow and confusion regarding Michael's actions. While Jorge and his loved ones have forgiven Michael, they still have countless questions. How could someone so young commit such a heinous crime? What led Michael down this path? These questions continue to haunt Jorge, leaving him with a heavy heart.
Did you ever see this list before? Yes. That's the hit list. That's disturbing, isn't it? It is disturbing.
Michael declined to speak during the court proceedings when asked if he wanted to address the court. His mother, Kathy Hernandez, however, expressed her remorse and acknowledged her son's mental illness. She emphasized the need for understanding and support, stating that her son did not deserve the unforgiving sentence of life in prison without parole.
The center in his prison jumpsuit, he does say in that profile that he's been locked up age 14.
Despite her plea, Michael's sentence of life imprisonment without parole remained unchanged. He appealed this decision, arguing that it is unconstitutional for a juvenile to receive such a harsh punishment. His defense said Michael basically had the juvenile death penalty and that he was locked away to die as a child.
Oh, why don't you practice your weekend learning how to cry?
Oh my God.
In 2016, the United States Supreme Court ruled that juveniles could no longer be automatically sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. This decision paved the way for a retrial in the case of Michael Hernandez. However, during Michael's retrial in 2016, which lasted 3 days, it became clear that during his years behind bars for murdering his best friend, he had not changed. The prosecution presented phone calls Michael made from prison where he spoke about his admiration for serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer and mass shooters like Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, who committed the infamous Columbine massacre.
How'd you muster up those tears?
I feel horrible about what I did.
Yeah, so horrible to say, I may have to stab myself.
Michael was sentenced to life in prison without parole again, although he faced the prospect of spending the rest of his life behind bars. His life wouldn't last much longer. In August 2021, at the age of 31, Michael passed away in prison due to a heart condition and natural causes. According to the autopsy report, Michael was morbidly obese at the time of his death. At just 5'10" and 285 pounds, he exhibited severe cardiac dysrhythmia.
Many people, that is a vitamin for me, a vitamin for my soul, a vitamin to be strong and continuing work for.
Jaime's parents, Jorge and Maria Goff, sat with 7 News to share their thoughts and feelings about Michael's passing. Maria, overcome with emotion, admitted that she couldn't stop crying upon hearing the news. Jorge, on the other hand, was shocked by the revelation, expressing disbelief and sorrow over their son's murderer's death.
So amazing. Now there's a fresh look at the sign out there.
Despite the tragic circumstances, Jamie's parents demonstrated remarkable grace and composure throughout the interview. They acknowledged that Michael's death was saddening, even as they expressed their disappointment that he had passed away despite all they had been through. As parents themselves, they knew the pain and loss that the family was experiencing.
God made us here, and we're not supposed to be killing each other.
Now at 6:30, the parents of Jaime Goff, who was killed in 2004 by a fellow classmate.
The news of Michael's death prompted Jorge and Maria to contemplate what Jaime's life could have been like had he still been alive. Jorge expressed his hope that Jaime would have pursued a successful career, married and formed a loving family. Maria, too, thought of her son every day and expressed her desire to reunite with her son one day. Michael Hernandez's shocking betrayal and brutal crime stunned everyone who knew him. But the next case takes us to an even more devastating act of violence within a family. Raymond Childs III, a teenager whose actions tore his own household apart in an unthinkable tragedy.
As well as his 13-year-old sister, 18-year-old brother, and his brother's 19-year-old pregnant girlfriend.
His first trial on those charges ended in a mistrial. Used an assault rifle during the shooting inside the home located on Adams Street here in Indianapolis. Pastor Sullivan told 13 News he's convinced that music can influence young people.
On January 24, 2021, a tragic event unfolded in Indianapolis, Indiana. On this day, a 17-year-old named Raymond Ronald Lee Child III committed a horrific crime, murdering his own family members in cold blood. The events leading up to the brutal act were set in motion when Childs received a phone call from his father, Raymond Childs Jr., asking him to come home from his girlfriend's house.
6 people, including a pregnant woman and her unborn child, found dead in this home on Adams Street.
When Raymond Childs arrived at the family home, his emotions quickly escalated. Angered by his father's request, he decided to act out his revenge in the most devastating manner possible. With a gun in hand, Raymond embarked on a mission of destruction, systematically eliminating every member of his family. Kezzie Childs, Raymond's 42-year-old mother, was his first victim. Raymond then turned his attention to his father, Raymond Childs Jr., and pulled the trigger, ending his life as well. Next, Raymond turned his attention to his 13-year-old sister, Rita. The violence continued as Raymond turned his gun on his 18-year-old brother, Elijah, and his 19-year-old pregnant girlfriend, Kiara Hawkins. In the midst of this carnage, Raymond's 15-year-old brother managed to escape and sought refuge at a neighbor's house. Alerting the local authorities, the survivor provided crucial information that would lead to Raymond's arrest. According to the testimony of the brother, Raymond shot both their parents in their home on Adams Street. The devastated father, in his last moments, uttered the words, "I'm sorry, Raymond. I love you." Based on the evidence provided by the brother, Raymond Childs III was arrested and charged with 6 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. He was charged as an adult under Indiana law, which meant that he faced the possibility of a maximum sentence of life without parole. In July 2024, Raymond Childs III finally went on trial for his crimes. However, the trial ended in a mistrial when a witness addressed Raymond from the stand, asking why he had committed the murders. This unexpected turn of events caused a mistrial, leaving Raymond's fate hanging in the balance. On October 24, 2024, the court proceedings surrounding Raymond's retrial came to a conclusion. After a 5-day trial, Raymond was found guilty of murder, attempted murder, and a misdemeanor charge of carrying a handgun without a license. Prosecutor Ryan Mears delivered a powerful statement following the verdict, expressing his utmost satisfaction. Mears stated that what happened on Adams Street in January 2021 was unfathomable, and he believed that the jury's verdict brought justice to the victims and the survivor of a horrific crime. Raymond's sentencing is scheduled for January 7, 2025. Next, we present to you the case of James Fairweather, a notorious murderer from the UK who committed a series of random acts of violence.
It was laying on the grass, like that. It was like that, just fast asleep, where he was drunk. Then he goes, he's the one.
James Fairweather attended Colchester Academy in England, where he encountered numerous struggles due to his physical appearance and struggle with academics. Diagnosed with dyslexia, James faced constant bullying, which only intensified his suffering. The loss of his beloved grandmother in 2012 further impacted his well-being, leading to a deep sense of grief and isolation. However, none of those circumstances provided an excuse for what James Fairweather would go on to do. On March 29, 2014, the unimaginable happened. James Fairweather attacked the defenseless James Atfield, a 33-year-old father of 5 who had been seriously injured in a car accident years before. The tragic incident unfolded at Castle Park, where James Atfield was lying on the grass. James Fairweather, driven by unimaginable rage, viciously stabbed James Atfield multiple times, leaving him bleeding to death. As the details of the case unfolded, it was revealed that James Atfield had been stabbed over 100 times. 3 months after the brutal murder of James Atfield, Nahid Al-Mania, a 31-year-old Saudi student at the University of Essex, fell victim to James Fairweather's violent rampage. Nahid's body was found on Salary Brook Trail, near her home, with multiple stab wounds.
So, today, Chief Superintendent Carl O'Malley gave interview after interview after interview, repeated appeals for public help.
As the police investigated, they questioned over 50 individuals with a history of knife crime in the area. James Fairweather remained under the radar. By January 2015, nearly 1,000 people had been spoken to regarding the murders of James Atfield and Nahid Al-Mania. These murders, which took place in a public park in broad daylight, shocked the nation. The head of the Major Crimes Unit for the Essex Police described the killings as brazenly executed. Despite the lack of evidence, the police even went as far as investigating whether Nahid's murder was a hate crime due to her Saudi background. In May 2015, a breakthrough came when a dog walker found James Fairweather loitering in a park and called the police. When the police arrived, they discovered James with rubber gloves and a knife in his possession. He was arrested on the spot. In January 2015, James Fairweather found himself the subject of a psychiatric evaluation. During this session, he disclosed that he had harbored antisocial and violent thoughts for quite some time. This revelation sparked a further investigation into James's life, and a search of his personal belongings led authorities to uncover a disturbing truth. James had a deep fascination with serial killers, with a particular interest in the Yorkshire Ripper. As the investigation continued, there was mounting evidence suggesting that James was indeed connected to the 2 murders in the park. Despite his initial denial of any involvement, the evidence against him grew stronger, leading to his arrest and being charged with 2 counts of murder and possession of an illegal weapon. James maintained his innocence throughout the legal proceedings, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. However, as the trial unfolded, James made a shocking decision. He ultimately pleaded guilty to 2 charges of manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. James admitted that he had committed the crimes, but claimed that he had psychosis at the time of the incident. Despite his admission, a court psychiatrist did not find sufficient evidence to support his claim of psychosis. On April 22, 2016, James was found guilty by a unanimous verdict. He was sentenced to life in prison with parole eligibility in 27 years. James attempted to appeal his sentence on the grounds of his young age, arguing that he was not fully aware of his actions. However, his appeal was rejected when the judge declared that James had been aware of what was happening at the time of the murders. Next, we turn to the disturbing case of Aiden Fucci. We'll uncover the chilling details of his crime and witness the emotional breakdown of a teenager spiraling into darkness.
So Tristan Bailey, Aiden Fucci, they went to school together at Patriot Oaks Academy. Both lived in an upper middle class neighborhood, pretty much had zero crime. May 9th, 2021, Bailey goes missing.
Tristan Bailey was born in January 2008. She was the youngest of 5 children and spent her first years growing up in sunny Singapore. Everyone who knew Tristan described her as an incredible friend with boundless energy. The Bailey family eventually returned to the United States and settled in St. Johns County, Florida. In May 2021, Tristan was a 7th grader at Patriot Oaks Academy, living a typical teenage girl's life. She was happy, popular, and a cheerleader. However, things changed on May 9th, 2021, when Tristan's mother went to her bedroom to wake her up and discovered she was nowhere to be found.
49 of the stab wounds were located on her hands, arms, legs.
Tragically, hours later, a person walking through a wooded area on Saddlestone Drive near Jacksonville stumbled upon a retention bond and couldn't help but notice what appeared to be a mannequin. Upon closer inspection, they realized it wasn't a mannequin, but the body of a young girl they'd all come to know and love. It was Tristan. The medical examiner's report revealed a shocking discovery. Tristan had been stabbed multiple times, with a staggering total of nearly 120 wounds. Shockingly, many of those wounds were found to be defensive, indicating that she had fought for her life. As crime scene investigators meticulously combed the area, they stumbled upon crucial evidence. A buck knife missing a tip was discovered in the pond near Tristan's body. However, the missing tip was found in an even more disturbing location, lodged in Tristan's head. Multiple witnesses came forward, stating that they had seen 14-year-old Aiden Fucci and Tristan together before she was reported missing. These statements, coupled with Aiden's ever-changing stories when questioned by police, added fuel to the fire. One of the stories Aiden told investigators involved an altercation between the two, where he claimed that Tristan had touched his privates, prompting him to push her away physically. According to Aiden, Tristan fell to the ground and hit her head. After being questioned by the police while sitting in a patrol car, Aiden took pictures and videos and posted them on Snapchat. In one post, Aiden asked, "Hey guys, has anybody seen Tristan lately?" At midnight on May 10th, 2021, the police conducted a search of Aiden's home in search of evidence connecting him to Tristan's murder. Inside the room belonging to Aiden, investigators discovered a sheath matching the knife found near Tristan's body. Additionally, they found clothing stained with blood. 3 hours later, Aiden was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. However, the charges were later upgraded to first-degree murder after further investigation and witness statements. Aiden was held without bond as the police delved deeper into his case. When the police spoke to Aiden's friends, they revealed that Aiden had admitted to them that he was going to kill someone by taking them into the woods and stabbing them. Sophie Bauman, Aiden's ex, shared a shocking revelation as well. She stated that one time when Aiden was playing around with her, he pretended to stab her and later told her that he heard voices in his head. Aiden's alleged actions, combined with the evidence presented against him, portrayed him as a troubled and dangerous young man. In a shocking turn of events, Aiden's mother, Crystal Smith, was arrested and charged with tampering with evidence. The accusation stated that Crystal had washed blood off her son's jeans, potentially hindering the investigation. However, despite the initial charges, she was later released. As jury selection was set to take place in February 2023, Aiden pleaded guilty to first-degree murder on February 6th. In a letter written after the incident, Aiden expressed remorse for the pain he had caused Tristan's family. Aiden's remorse did not spare him the consequences of his actions. On March 24, 2023, he was given a maximum sentence of life in prison, with a minimum parole eligibility of 25 years.
This case is probably the most difficult and shocking case that this county in St. Johns County has.
Judge R. Lee Smith described the case as difficult and shocking, emphasizing that Tristan was murdered for no reason other than Aiden's internal desire to feel the thrill of taking another person's life. to symbolize the pain and suffering endured by Tristan's family. One of Tristan's sisters dropped 144 stone hearts into a glass jar. Each heart represented the number of times Tristan had been stabbed. As each loved one of Tristan read their statements, the room was filled with a mix of emotions. The pain, anger, and sadness were palpable in the air. With each passing sentence, the jar of hearts stood in front of them, symbolizing the shattered remains of their hearts. Aiden Fucci's horrifying actions and lack of remorse shocked the nation, but the next case is equally unsettling. Zaire Brooks, a young man whose violent choices left devastating consequences for those around him.
Edmund Butler was only 17. His family had just had a celebration sending him off to prom. But last July, Butler was found dead in his car here at South Leibold and Gilroy Streets in southwest Detroit.
Officers of the Detroit Police Department were called to a shooting scene on July 26, 2022, outside of River Rogue in the southwest part of the city. Upon arrival, they discovered the body of a 17-year-old young man named Edmund Butler, who had been shot in the back of his head. The medical examiner later determined the cause of death to be a gunshot wound, and the manner was ruled a homicide.
Detroit police interrogation video is of 17-year-old Zaire Brooks. Brooks was Butler's lifelong best friend.
As the investigation unfolded, detectives of the Detroit Police Department swiftly zeroed in on Edmund Butler's best friend, Zaire Brooks. After extensive interrogation, Zaire eventually admitted to being the one who shot and killed Edmund. He revealed that he had planned to meet Edmund with the intention of buying $200 worth of marijuana, but all along, he had sinister intentions. According to Zaire, his intention was to rob his friend, Edmund. However, things took a tragic turn when he claims he was forced to shoot Edmund, fearing that he could identify Zaire as the robber. On August 31, 2022, Zaire was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, felony murder, carrying a concealed weapon, and other felony charges related to firearms. Due to the severity of his actions, Zaire was charged as an adult even though he was 17 years old. Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy issued a statement emphasizing that the prosecutor's office takes any decision to waive juveniles as adults extremely seriously. She called the case truly tragic, affecting all parties involved. In June 2023, Zaire Brooks and the prosecution finally reached a plea agreement. The prosecution dismissed several felony charges against Zaire, making room for a more focused sentence. Wayne County Circuit Judge Sharice Anderson ultimately sentenced Zaire to 23 to 40 years in prison for second-degree murder and 2 years for a weapons felony firearm charge. Next, we turn to the shocking case of teen killer Ethan Couch, whose defense argued he was too wealthy to face the consequences of his crimes. His insane sentence left the courtroom stunned and sparked intense debate.
Couch was 16, crashing into a group of people who were helping 24-year-old Brianna Mitchell, who had broken down on the side of the road. Mitchell, Holly Boyles, her daughter Shelby Boyles, and youth pastor Brian Jennings.
Ethan Couch was born into an upper-middle-class family in Burleson, Texas. When he was 13 years old, he began attending Anderson Private School, a prestigious institution known for its high standards and academic excellence. However, Ethan's journey at Anderson Private School was short-lived. After the principal raised concerns about Ethan's behavior, his father, Fred, and his mother, Tanya, decided to pull him out of school. Instead of attending a traditional school, Ethan was enrolled in a co-op in Watauga. Things seemed to be looking up for Ethan at the age of 15. He had enrolled at community college and was seemingly on a path to success. However, fate had other plans in store for him. One day, Ethan found himself in a parked pickup truck with a naked, unconscious 14-year-old girl. The authorities were called to the scene, and Ethan was charged with minor consumption and possession of alcohol. Ethan decided to plead guilty. He was sentenced to probation, an alcohol awareness course, and community service. It seemed like this was an opportunity for Ethan to turn his life around. Unfortunately, Ethan's troubles with the law were far from over. Despite his efforts to stay out of trouble, he ended up making headlines for all the wrong reasons. On the night of June 15, 2013, Ethan Couch, accompanied by a group of friends, embarked on an ill-fated journey that would change their lives forever. Armed with 2 cases of beer he had stolen from Walmart, Ethan decided to drive his father's 2012 red Ford pickup truck with 7 passengers inside. As Ethan recklessly sped down the road, oblivious to the speed limit and warning signs, tragedy unfolded. 24-year-old Brianna Mitchell's SUV had stalled, and she pulled over to seek assistance. Brianna had no idea fate would bring her face-to-face with Ethan and his irresponsible actions. Holly Boyles and her daughter Shelby, who were living nearby, happened to be passing by. Holly, a 52-year-old woman, and her 21-year-old daughter Shelby, who was home visiting from university, decided to lend a helping hand to Brianna. In the meantime, Brian Jennings, a youth minister and father of 3, had also stopped to assist Brianna. As Ethan's truck barreled down the road, it swerved into Brianna's vehicle and crashed into Brian's parked car. The collision caused Brian's car to strike an oncoming vehicle, and in an instant, the scene turned into a chaotic disaster. Ethan's truck flipped over, ramming into a tree. Tragically, Brianna Mitchell, Holly and Shelby Boyles, and Brian Jennings all lost their lives in the incident. Sergio Molina, a passenger in Ethan Couch's vehicle, survived the horrific crash, but was left paralyzed from the neck down. The other passengers in Ethan's vehicle, as well as Ethan himself, were taken to the hospital, but miraculously they suffered no serious injuries. However, 3 hours after the incident, it was discovered that Ethan's blood alcohol level was a staggering 0.24%, 3 times over the legal limit. As if that weren't enough, he also tested positive for marijuana and diazepam. After the medical staff cleared Ethan at the hospital, he was arrested and charged with 4 counts of intoxication manslaughter and 2 counts of intoxication assault. He pleaded not guilty. As the story unfolded, the media soon discovered that Ethan's parents, Fred and Tanya, had been in trouble with the law. Fred had previously been charged with evading arrest, theft by check, and assault on Tanya. To add insult to injury, he was also convicted of misdemeanor assault in 2000. While these charges were shocking, Tanya's past truly raised eyebrows. In 2013, the same year as the fatal accident involving her son, Tanya was sentenced to a $500 fine and community service for reckless driving. It was a disturbing revelation that hinted at a disregard for the law and the consequences of their actions. It was obvious from the beginning that the Couch family was used to some sort of privilege. This mindset became even more apparent when G. Dick Miller, a defense-hired psych, testified during Ethan's trial. Miller claimed that Ethan suffered from affluenza and couldn't link his actions with consequences because his mother and father taught him that money, privilege, and power were connected. The affluenza defense, a term coined by the Couch family's legal team, gained international attention for its outrageous claims. The defense argued that Ethan's privileged upbringing had prevented him from understanding the consequences of his actions. They argued that Ethan's wealth had shielded him from reality and distorted his moral compass.
Did not have the authority to do so. The High Court disagreed. You'll remember Couch unsuccessfully used that privileged upbringing affluenza defense and received 10 years probation.
However, many people found the affluenza defense ludicrous and offensive. Critics argued that it perpetuated the idea that the wealthy are exempt from responsibility and blame. It sparked debates about the role of privilege in society and the responsibility of parents in raising their children. As Ethan Couch faced the consequences of his actions, his family's reactions were mixed. Tanya Couch expressed remorse for her son's actions, but defended the use of the affluenza defense. On the other hand, Fred Couch remained unrepentant and blamed the media for his son's fate. The reactions from the Couch family further fueled public outrage and discussions about the severity of Ethan's sentence. Many believed that his punishment did not fit the crime, while others argued that it was necessary to hold him accountable. Ethan was sentenced to attend an upscale rehab center that costs approximately $500,000 a year. In addition to his rehab requirement, Ethan was ordered on probation for 10 years and was given additional restrictions. He was required to wear an ankle monitor, submit to drug testing, and abide by a 9 p.m. curfew. The judge also ordered Ethan to install a video interlocking ignition device on his car. Eric Boyles, Holly's husband and Shelby's father, told the media in 2014 that he felt Ethan's sentence was too lenient. He argued that the outcome might have been different if Ethan hadn't had the money to afford a top-notch defense. This statement sparked controversy and debate, with several people questioning the severity of the punishment. In the midst of all the controversy, 6 civil lawsuits were filed by the victims' and survivors' families against Ethan and his family. These lawsuits sought justice and compensation for the pain and suffering caused. However, all the suits were eventually settled out of court, allowing the parties involved to move on from this chapter. Despite going to rehab and being on probation, Ethan's actions continued to defy the legal system. In December 2015, police were alerted to a tweet that alleged Ethan was playing beer pong at a party and drinking alcohol. This blatant violation of his probation sparked an investigation, issuing a warrant for his arrest. However, Ethan managed to elude authorities, with his probation officer failing to make contact with his mother, Tanya. U.S. Marshals and the FBI joined the effort as the search for Ethan intensified. By the end of December, Ethan and Tanya were finally located in Mexico and extradited to the U.S. Ethan was taken into custody and faced the consequences of his actions. On April 13, 2016, Ethan was finally sentenced by a district judge named Wayne Salvant. Ethan received 4 consecutive terms of 180 days, extending his probation to longer. Just when it seemed Ethan had learned his lesson, he once again found himself in hot water. In January 2020, Ethan was accused of violating his probation when he tested positive for THC. To the surprise of many, Ethan was released just 1 day after it was determined that the positive result could have come from either illegal marijuana or CBD oil. The leniency shown towards Ethan again sparked outrage, with critics questioning the system's ability to handle repeat offenders. Ethan Couch's reckless actions and the controversial affluenza defense left many outraged. But the next case takes us to an even more chilling moment in history.
Custody until she's 25, then go to state prison. That everyone expected. What they did not expect was the judge's permission to tape the audio portion of the proceeding.
Brenda Spencer was born and raised in Chula Vista, California, to parents Dorothy and Wallace Spencer. However, things turned tragic after Dorothy discovered that Wallace was cheating on her with several women. These affairs led to a breakdown of their marriage, and the couple eventually divorced. After the divorce, Brenda moved with her father, Wallace, into a filthy apartment. Living conditions were far from ideal, as they shared a mattress on the living room floor. The home was littered with empty bottles from Wallace's alcohol abuse. It was during this period that Brenda's behavior began to deteriorate. People around her would later claim that she harbored a deep hatred for policemen, referring to them as pigs and cheering whenever she saw reports of officers involved in shootings. Brenda's erratic behavior scared many people, and she was often described as crazy. Around this time, Brenda started to get into trouble with the law. Her probation officer believed it was necessary for her to undergo a psych evaluation. This evaluation concluded that Brenda should be admitted to a mental hospital to seek professional help for her mental health. However, her father, Wallace Spencer, vehemently denied this decision and decided to take matters into his own hands. Instead of seeking proper mental health treatment for his daughter, Wallace Spencer purchased Brenda a Ruger 1022 semi-automatic .22 caliber rifle with a telescoping light and 500 pounds of ammunition. Little did he know that this decision would set off a tragic chain of events. On January 29, 1979, Brenda Spencer opened fire from the window of her house, aiming her rifle towards Grover Cleveland Elementary School.
After neighbors, nearby residents, and all the school children were safely evacuated, police mapped out their strategy. Prepared for either lengthy negotiations or for an assault.
The innocent children and staff inside were unsuspecting targets for Brenda's rage. In a matter of minutes, she shot and killed 53-year-old principal Burton Ragg and injured 8 other children. She also managed to wound 56-year-old Mike Sucher, the school custodian, fatally. Officer Robert Robb arrived at the scene in an attempt to end the massacre. However, as he approached Brenda's house, she opened fire, striking him in the neck. Luckily, the police at the scene acted quickly and moved a garbage truck in Brenda's line of fire, stopping her from shooting any further. Brenda then barricaded herself inside her home and spoke to a reporter from the Evening Tribune on the phone. She revealed her motive for the shooting, saying, "I don't like Mondays."
After hours of waiting, the negotiations did pay off. SWAT officers and police could congratulate themselves on the fact that no more blood was spilled after the initial shootings.
After several hours of negotiation, negotiators surrounded Brenda after being promised a Burger King. Despite her age, Brenda was charged as an adult and pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and assault with a deadly weapon. In April 1980, just 1 day after she turned 18, she was sentenced to concurrent terms of 25 years to life.
There being no legal cause, why sentence should not now be imposed?
That is correct.
As to counts 1 and 2, the sentence is 25 years to life.
In exchange, 9 counts of attempted murder were dismissed. Brenda's actions shocked the nation and earned her the title Schoolgirl Sniper. With her young age and lack of remorse, the public reaction was a mix of shock and horror. This crime was particularly chilling as she targeted elementary school students. The thought of a child being gunned down by a teenager left many in disbelief. The lead singer of the Boomtown Rats, an Irish new wave band, was particularly struck by what happened. Bob Geldof was deeply affected by Brenda's story. He was particularly struck that Brenda had cited her dislike of Mondays for her heinous crime. This quote inspired Bob to write a song called I Don't Like Mondays, released in July 1979. Despite the severity of the charges, Brenda became eligible for parole in 1993 for the first time. However, her request was denied. At her parole hearing in 2001, Brenda alleged that her father had harmed her, but her father, Wallace, adamantly denied these claims, stating they were untrue. The board ultimately denied her parole. Brenda, currently serving her sentence at the California Institution for Women, was dealt a devastating blow at her latest parole hearing in August 2022. In spite of her efforts to prove her rehabilitation, she was still deemed unsuitable for release. Her next parole hearing is in 2025. Brenda Spencer's unthinkable act of violence shocked a nation and left an enduring legacy of pain. But the next case takes us to a very different kind of crime. Max Wade, a teenager whose bold and audacious crimes, including theft and attempted murder, revealed a dangerous mix of recklessness and ambition.
Wade's legs will be chained up during his upcoming trial. His attorney was concerned about the image that would have on the jury, so curtains have been put up in front of his seat. This area here.
Max Wade first gained attention when he made headlines for stealing a Lamborghini that belonged to none other than celebrity chef Guy Fieri. This audacious act earned him 15 minutes of fame and landed him in hot water with the law. However, Max's legal troubles did not end there. In 2013, he was found guilty of 6 charges, including attempted murder. Despite being just a teenager at the time of the crimes, he was tried as an adult. In April 2012, Max committed a drive-by shooting in Mill Valley. His target was 19-year-old Landon Wallstrom, who was in a car with 18-year-old Eva Dedier. Max was initially charged with attempted murder in Eva's case, but the charge was dropped. Max's actions were deemed so severe that he was ultimately sentenced to life in prison, plus 21 years and 4 months. Judge Kelly Simmons, who delivered the harsh verdict, stated that Max planned the attack perfectly, and that's kind of scary. However, the sentence was met with controversy as Max's attorney argued that it violated the 8th Amendment, which protects individuals from cruel and unusual punishment. Max's defense attorney argued that considering his immaturity and troubled childhood, a life sentence would be disproportionate and unfair. They argued that Max's young age and troubled upbringing should have been taken into account by the judge, considering Max's lack of criminal experience and background. The prosecution sought to counter these claims by highlighting Max's dangerous nature and intentions. They argued that Max had planned to carry out a violent burglary at a high-end San Francisco jewelry store, valued at over $6 million. This planned heist involved the use of a bomb, fake police uniforms, and a chopper. Despite reviewing the evidence, Judge Simmons denied the prosecution's request to introduce this evidence, stating that the plans were unrelated to Max's current case. This decision caused an uproar among some who believed Max's intentions should have been considered in sentencing. While some argued that he deserves a life sentence for his crimes, others believe that his age and troubled background should have been taken into account. One of the detectives who worked on the case and had helped identify Max as a suspect expressed his satisfaction with the guilty verdict. He was quoted as saying, "I wouldn't want my mother or girlfriend to be on the same streets as Max Wade." In a shocking turn of events, in 2021, Max's sentence was significantly reduced by 10 years, which increased his parole eligibility by 7 years. During Max's parole hearing, he shocked everyone with his remarkable transformation. He claimed that he had changed significantly while in prison, stating that the death of a close friend had had a profound impact on him. Max elaborated on how this experience had opened his eyes and made him realize the error of his ways. Max went on to tell the parole board that he had earned his GED and was now studying computer science. He expressed a desire to work in cybersecurity. The state parole board, impressed by Max's good behavior and assessed him as a low to moderate risk, decided to grant him parole. This decision was met with objections from the Marin District Attorney's Office, which argued that Max was merely a wolf in sheep's clothing. Despite their concerns, the parole board stood by their decision, citing Max's impressive progress and willingness to change. The parole decision, made on July 20th, will be reviewed by the board's legal division and California Governor Gavin Newsom. This process can take upwards of 3 months as both parties carefully examine the details of the case and weigh the potential consequences. It is crucial to note that the governor, who holds the ultimate authority in such cases, makes the final determination of Max's parolees. From Max Wade's high-speed chase with the law, we move on to a far darker and more disturbing story: the case of Robert and Michael Beaver. These teenage brothers took sibling rivalry to a horrifying level, committing unthinkable acts against their own family.
Broken Arrow, Oklahoma has 1, maybe 2 murders a year, but tonight this community is reeling from 5, the worst crime anyone here can remember.
In 2015, the quiet town of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma was rocked by a shocking crime involving the Beaver family. Daniel and April Beaver were a seemingly ordinary couple, raising their 5 children in a modest home. But beneath this facade, a darker truth lurked. The Beavers were a close-knit unit, with Robert, Michael, Crystal, Daniel, Christopher, Victoria, and Autumn making up their brood. Those who knew the family described them as quiet and withdrawn, preferring to keep to themselves. The children, homeschooled by their parents, were rarely seen interacting with other children in the neighborhood. Despite their seemingly innocent exterior, rumors about the Beaver brothers, Robert and Michael, began to circulate. There was something unsettling about them, but no one could put their finger on it.
Police don't yet have a motive, one calling this the worst single criminal event in this town's history.
On July 21, 2015, Robert and Michael Beaver collected body armor and knives, hatching a plan to carry out a horrific act of violence. These two brothers were plotting to murder their family the very next day. Around 11:30 p.m., Robert and Michael enacted their deadly plan, starting with a horrifying act of violence. They slit their 13-year-old sister Crystal's throat, leaving her fighting for her life. Crystal fought against her brothers, escaping the bedroom and running for the front door, but her siblings were not about to let her escape. They dragged her back inside the house and unleashed an even more brutal assault on her. The extent of Crystal's injuries were horrifying, with her internal organs almost spilling out. Incredibly, she survived this brutal assault, but the rest of the family was not so lucky. Robert and Michael went on a rampage, brutally murdering their parents and siblings. Robert, in a fit of rage, fatally stabbed his mother, April, a staggering 48 times. While Christopher and Victoria Beaver were hiding in the bathroom during the assault, using a clever ruse, Michael pretended to be scared and a victim, knocking on the door and pleading for help. Christopher decided to open the door and allow Michael inside, thinking it was a matter of safety. Instead of seeking safety, Michael turned on his unsuspecting siblings, fatally stabbing each of them over 20 times. With his bloodlust seemingly sated, Michael turned to his father's home office, where his younger brother Daniel was hiding. Once again, he employed the same ruse, pretending to be a victim chased by Robert. Daniel opened the door, allowing Michael to enter. As Michael stepped into his father's office, he turned towards Robert, their other brother, and uttered chilling words. "He's all yours." In a moment of pure madness, Robert turned his knife on his younger brother Daniel and stabbed him in the stomach, chest, head, and back. Daniel Beaver woke up and found himself face to face with his son, Robert. In a matter of seconds, he lunged at his father's throat and stabbed his father repeatedly, 28 times, leaving him lifeless. After committing these heinous crimes, Robert and his brother Michael fled the scene, fleeing out the back door and into the woods that surrounded the house. They knew that the authorities would soon be on their trail, and they had no intentions of getting caught. Daniel Beaver, as he died, called 911. As police officers walked towards the front door, they noticed a pool of blood on the porch. With their hearts pounding, they knocked repeatedly on the door, calling out for any survivors. After an eternity, the officers heard a faint voice calling for help. Breaking down the door, they entered to find 13-year-old Crystal lying in a puddle of her blood. She was rushed to the nearest hospital, where doctors worked frantically to save her life. When Crystal was stable, she identified her brothers as the assailants. In addition to Crystal, only 2-year-old Autumn managed to escape the relentless violence, miraculously escaping with her life. But the rest of the family was gone, their lives ripped away in the most horrific way imaginable. Robert and Michael were arrested at 12:18 a.m. Officers apprehended the brothers using a K-9 unit after they were discovered hiding in a bush. They had each been charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of assault and battery with intent to kill. Michael, at 16, was tried as an adult, a decision that sparked controversy among legal professionals. His attorney argued that charging him as an adult was unconstitutional, stating that if convicted, he would be doomed to die in prison. Such an outcome, the attorney claimed, was effectively the same as a death sentence. The attorney contended that there was abuse in the Beaver household. However, no concrete evidence was provided to show that there was abuse within the Beaver household. Initially, Robert and Michael pleaded not guilty, maintaining their innocence in the face of overwhelming odds. While incarcerated, Robert dared to take his own life. However, fate intervened when a guard stumbled upon him in the nick of time. Robert pleaded guilty to all charges and was given 5 life sentences without parole, as well as an additional life term. Michael's trial began in April 2018. After 1 month of deliberation, the jury found him guilty and sentenced him to 5 life sentences with parole. Robert, who should have been safely locked away behind bars, attempted to attack 2 prison officers in the day room in 2019. This incident resulted in him receiving 3 more life terms, bringing his total amount of life sentences to 9. Robert and Michael are serving their sentences at the Joseph Harp Correctional Center and the Lexington Correctional Center, respectively, in Lexington, Oklahoma. After the chilling case of Robert and Michael Beaver, where sibling violence shattered an entire family, we now turn to the story of Kiram Currington.
Her name is Lelia King, and she was 30 years old. Police tell us she was caught in the crossfire of 2 groups shooting at each other.
In July 2022, police in Columbus, Ohio initiated a large-scale search for 16-year-old Kiram Currington. This search began after police were summoned to a shooting incident on July 16th. Upon their arrival, they discovered the body of Lelia King, a 30-year-old mother who had been tragically shot. Lelia had found herself trapped in the middle of a shootout between 2 groups in a convenience store parking lot. Unfortunately, she succumbed to her injuries at Mount Carmel East Hospital less than 3 hours later.
And police just sent us these photos of 3 people they think may have played a role in this homicide.
After conducting a thorough investigation, detectives obtained surveillance footage that led them to identify Kiram Currington as a person of interest in the case. After reviewing the footage, they realized that Kiram was directly involved in the tragic incident that resulted in Lelia's death. 1 month after the tragic incident involving Lelia King, the prime suspect in her shooting death was finally apprehended. Kiram Currington was arrested and faced charges for his involvement in the heinous crime. The charges brought against him included reckless homicide, among other offenses. However, Kiram maintained his innocence and pleaded not guilty to all charges. As time passed, the case continued to unfold, and in December of 2023, a shocking turn took place. Kiram, now charged as an adult, pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter in relation to Lelia's death. The Franklin County Court of Common Pleas judge presiding over the case handed down a sentence of 7 to 9 years for Kiram's actions. This punishment was met with mixed reactions from the general public, with some expressing satisfaction, while others called for harsher penalties. From Kiram Currington's tragic outburst of violence, we now move on to the unsettling case of Kiona Mouton. Mouton's story, much like Currington's, highlights the unpredictable and dangerous paths some young people take.
Some breaking news now, an update to a story we brought you right at 4 o'clock. The young woman who lured a Lamar High School student to his death in a gang-related hit has just been sentenced.
Kiona Samiriel Mouton, a 16-year-old student at Lamar High School, was the center of a heinous crime in 2018. Known for her charm and charisma, Kiona had caught the attention of 18-year-old DeLindsay Mack, who had a crush on her. On November 3, 2018, Kiona lured DeLindsay to an abandoned lot, promising him a surprise. Little did he know that this surprise would be a meeting with his fate. Kendrick Johnson, a gang member with a chilling reputation, was waiting in the shadows, ready to strike. In a tragic turn of events, Kendrick Johnson opened fire on DeLindsay, ultimately leading to his death. Davian Thomas, the getaway driver, was present during the crime, but the identity of the second shooter remained a mystery. The Houston Police Department and the prosecution are urging the public to provide any information regarding his identity. The consequences of Kiona's actions were far-reaching, leaving a lasting impact on everyone involved. Kiona, now facing criminal charges, found herself facing the prospect of a life in prison. Her actions not only cost the life of an innocent young man, but also shattered the lives of his family and loved ones. Kendrick Johnson was sentenced to life without parole for his involvement in the heinous crime. Davian Thomas, the getaway driver in the DeLindsay murder case, received an equally harsh sentence. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison. According to court records, DeLindsay's murder was the result of an ongoing war between 2 Houston area gangs. DeLindsay, a promising athlete, had recently transferred to Lamar High School from Yates High School to escape gang vice. In 2024, Kiona Samiriel, now 22, was sentenced to 23 years in prison for her part in DeLindsay's death. Despite her age at the time of the crime, she was charged as an adult, meaning that she must serve at least half of her sentence before becoming eligible for parole. As Kiona's sentencing hearing got underway, DeLindsay's mother had the chance to address Kiona directly. She unleashed her anger and resentments towards Kiona in a powerful emotional speech. Her voice filled with raw emotion, she expressed her deepest hatred towards the teen, stating, "I hate you. You disgust me." While Kiona attempted to fight back tears, DeLindsay's mother had no qualms about pouring salt on her wounds. She bluntly told Kiona, "Don't you dare cry." The sentiment was clear. This mother felt no sympathy or remorse for the perpetrator of the heinous crime. In the aftermath of the hearing, Assistant District Attorney Sarah Seeley held a press conference to address the sentencing. She emphasized the severity of the case, highlighting its devastating impact on DeLindsay's parents. Miss Seeley stated that DeLindsay's parents had placed their child in the one place they believed he would be safe, school. But Kiona had taken advantage of the situation and orchestrated the murder. Kiona Mouton's shocking crime left a community in disbelief, but the next case reveals an even more harrowing tragedy.
Teenager who is accused of shooting a classmate 3 times was in court this afternoon to face upgraded adult charges. Daravius Smith has been in a juvenile detention center.
In January 2022, a shocking incident occurred at Seminole High School in Florida, leaving the community in disbelief. Sanford police arrested a 16-year-old student named Daravius Smith for allegedly shooting an 18-year-old student inside the school around noon. The charges against Daravius include 1 count of open attempted homicide, 1 count of possession of a firearm on campus, and 1 count of firing a weapon and disturbing the peace while interfering with school functions.
McIntyre is a senior who played cornerback on the Seminole High School football team. His family says he has been planning on playing in college next year and has several offers.
The victim of the shooting, Javon McIntyre, was a cornerback for his high school football team who dreamed of playing the sport in college. However, after the shooting, Javon's hopes were put into question, as he worried his injuries might hinder his chances of pursuing his dreams. Javon underwent surgery on his wrist after being shot 3 times, but fortunately, he survived and was in stable condition.
Deputies say he shot 18-year-old Javon McIntyre 3 times on campus at Seminole High School last month. After Smith told investigators the two had words in the bathroom.
Initially, the detectives investigating the shooting believed the motive behind the incident was linked to a girl. However, as they looked deeper into the case, they discovered that it was actually over a deceased relative. This revelation shocked the community and left many questioning the motive behind the senseless act of violence. According to the chief of police, there was no indication the shooting was gang-related. However, this only adds more mystery to the case. Before the tragic incident, Daravia Smith and Javon McIntyre were friends. However, the two teens had a confrontation 1 week before the shooting, which left everyone scratching their heads. Daravias, while speaking with detectives, claimed that Javon was taunting him between classes. However, he denied any threats or attempts to initiate a fight with Javon. On the day of the shooting, Daravias claimed that he hid in a bathroom to avoid Javon. He alleged that Javon was waiting for him outside the bathroom, ready to engage in a fight. In his statement to the detectives, Daravias claimed he was not scared, but because he was inexperienced in fights, he decided to shoot Javon instead. Shockingly, Daravias admitted to firing multiple shots at Javon before the gun jammed. He claimed that he fled the scene afterward, disposed of the weapon, and hid until he was eventually caught. 1 month after Daravia Smith was charged with attempted murder, his case was transferred from the juvenile justice system to the adult circuit court. Daravias opted not to go to trial, instead entering a no-contest plea to the charges against him. In July 2024, Daravias faced the consequences of his actions as Judge John Galuzzo handed down a 15-year prison sentence to be served concurrently. Additionally, he was ordered to serve 5 years on probation.
Probable cause for attempted first-degree premeditated murder with a firearm reclassified as a light felony. Your client will be held at no bond as to that count.
While on probation, Daravias was ordered to wear a GPS and is prohibited from possessing firearms. The judge made another important decision, banning Daravias from having contact with his victims, their families, and even Seminole High School property. Recognizing the potential mental health issues at play, the judge ordered Daravias to undergo mental health evaluations. In addition to mental health evaluations, the judge also required Daravias to enroll in anger management courses and life skills programs. Javon McIntyre filed a lawsuit against the Seminole County school system in November 2022. In his lawsuit, he alleged that the school did not do enough to protect him. According to Javon's complaint, several school officials heard Daravias threaten him 1 week before he was shot. The complaint further alleges that as he was running and screaming for help after being shot, one school staff member ran past him in the opposite direction and didn't help. Javon, by 2022, was a student at Tusculum University in Tennessee. Due to the devastating consequences of the shooting, Javon sought justice and demanded compensation. He believed his injuries warranted a fair settlement and is seeking at least $100,000. Our next case takes a shocking turn with Curtis and Catherine Jones, siblings who became the youngest teens ever charged with first-degree murder in the U.S.
Jones was only 13 and her brother Curtis 12 when they shot and killed Nicole Spites in 1999.
Curtis and Catherine Jones were siblings who found themselves at the center of a shocking murder case. Living in Port St. John, Florida, with their father, Curtis Jones Sr., the siblings were part of a tight-knit family. However, things took a turn when Curtis Sr. began a relationship with Nicole Spites, a 29-year-old woman with 2 daughters.
The brother and sister, the youngest at the time to be charged as adults with murder in the country, pled out and were sentenced to 18 years in prison.
For a few months in late 1998 and early 1999, the Jones family, Nicole and her daughters, had lived together. However, on January 6, 1999, a horrific event unfolded that would change their lives forever. As Nicole sat working on a 500-piece puzzle at the dining room table, Catherine approached her, holding her father's 9mm handgun. Without hesitation, Catherine opened fire, shooting Nicole in the torso. In the chaos that followed, Catherine dropped the gun, leaving it within reach of her brother Curtis. Curtis seized the opportunity and opened fire, continuing to shoot Nicole until the gun was empty. This deadly assault left Nicole dead on the kitchen floor. The detectives alleged Curtis and Catherine, 13 and 12 years old, covered up their tracks after shooting Nicole, staged the scene as a robbery, and ran into the woods, where they spent one night before they were found and arrested. At just 12 and 13 years old, Curtis and Catherine became the youngest people charged with first-degree murder in the United States. However, it quickly became evident that these two couldn't fully grasp the gravity of their actions. During the court proceedings, Curtis made a shocking request. He asked his attorney if he could bring his Nintendo to prison.
I can't say how many more times he fired the gun, but I know after maybe the last 2 bullets.
According to the Brevard County Sheriff's agent Todd Goodyear, the motive behind Nicole's murder was that the siblings were jealous of their father's girlfriend. This jealousy turned into deadly consequences, with both Curtis and Catherine pleading guilty to second-degree murder charges. It was believed that justice had been served at the time, but a shocking revelation would soon come to light.
I actually took the fingerprints off the gun and wiped it down, and I told my brother that he got hysterical. He had an emotional breakdown because, once again, this is reality now. This isn't some idea that's in our head anymore. This is reality.
In 2009, Catherine spoke to Florida Today and admitted that there was more to Nicole's shooting than meets the eye. According to Catherine, a family member who had been staying in their home sexually abused her and her brother Curtis. However, Catherine said their claims were not taken seriously when meeting with her father, Curtis Sr., and Nicole. Jessica and Inez, Nicole's daughters, were left to pick up the pieces after. Curtis and Catherine killed their mother. For years after the murder, Jessica and Inez perpetuated the lie that their mother was alive and well in Florida. The girls desperately clung to this fantasy. They continued to deceive their friends, pretending that Nicole was on an extended vacation. Finally, after years of suppressing the truth, Jessica mustered the courage to share it with her closest friends. The weight of that lie had become too heavy to bear, and she knew she had to seek help. In a moment of bravery, she revealed that her mother, Nicole, had been brutally murdered by a 12 and 13-year-old. As time went on, Jessica and Inez couldn't help but miss their mother at some of the most pivotal moments of their lives. Curtis Jones, now a youth minister, was released in July 2015, while his sister, Catherine Jones, followed in November of the same year. While adjusting to life outside of prison, Catherine worked at Sonic and supported herself independently. Driven by her desire to make a difference in the lives of others, Catherine made a bold and ambitious move to Washington, D.C., where she met with a Democratic senator to discuss changing how juvenile offenders are sentenced. Having spent half of her life incarcerated, Catherine's everyday experiences were like embarking on a new adventure. With a release date that coincided with Thanksgiving, Catherine's spirit soared as she envisioned spending the holiday with her brother Curtis. In an interview while in prison, Catherine expressed her remorse for the taking of Nicole's life and her deep regret for her actions. However, she confessed that she found solace in the solitude and introspection of prison life. When Nicole's daughters, Jessica and Inez, learned of Curtis and Catherine's impending release from prison in 2015, they expressed their pain to Florida Today. However, they also revealed their capacity for forgiveness. According to that article, Curtis and Catherine had never apologized to Jessica or Inez and appeared to have no remorse for their actions. After witnessing the tragic story of Curtis and Catherine Jones, two siblings who made a haunting pact at such a young age, we moved to the case of Jordan Roach.
Stand trial as an adult. On Thursday, Roche pleaded guilty to killing Cargill and was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
In 2017, Caitlin Cargill, a 14-year-old from Arlington, Texas, decided to walk with her dog. Caitlin left the apartment complex where she resided. Her family expected her to return home soon. However, their hopes began to fade as the hours turned into days.
14-year-old Caitlin Cargill, who disappeared in June only to be discovered dead in a landfill, may have had a deal to manufacture and sell a drug. An arrest warrant affidavit for Jordan Roach.
On the second day after Caitlin's disappearance, her body was found in an Arlington landfill. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, and the search for justice began. It wasn't until August 2017 that the police finally revealed Caitlin's cause of death. Tragically, it was determined that she had been the victim of homicidal violence. This news only intensified the search for answers. In September 2017, police made a shocking announcement. They had arrested 16-year-old Jordan Roach, an acquaintance of Caitlin's. Jordan was charged with murder and transported to the Tarrant County Juvenile Detention Facility in Fort Worth. According to Jordan's arrest records, the police believed Caitlin was killed because of a drug deal gone bad. They also alleged that the murder weapon used was a hammer.
Police say they found a claw hammer along with Cargill's blood inside of an apartment.
Caitlin's murder sparked outrage among the residents of Bedford, where the young girl once lived. They are not only angered by the brutality of the crime, but also by the way the police and the media treated Caitlin. One of the most concerning aspects of this case is that the Bedford police never issued an Amber Alert when Caitlin disappeared in June 2017. This failure to act concerned many community members, as they believed that the situation warranted an immediate response. However, the Bedford police stated that Caitlin's information was entered into a local and national database, but they had no information to indicate she had been abducted, and therefore could not issue an Amber Alert. Fast forward to April 2022, and there is finally some closure in the case.
Is committed to remembering her daughter with a memorial garden in Hearst and a motorcycle ride each June in Caitlin's honor.
I live because she can't, so we do.
Jordan Roach, the 17-year-old perpetrator, was sentenced to 10 years in prison after he pleaded guilty. Since Jordan had been behind bars since his arrest, it meant that he would receive credit for time served. Trisha West, Caitlin's mother, expressed her outrage and disbelief at her daughter's murder during Jordan's sentencing hearing. She firmly believed her daughter would have become a valuable member of society, but Jordan's actions robbed Caitlin of that opportunity.
The only thing I can say is that you somehow have to find peace.
Trisha addressed Jordan directly, telling him that he had stolen Caitlin's life and her dreams. She expressed her deep regret at not being able to witness her daughter's bright future unfold. Through tears, she made it clear that Jordan had not only taken Caitlin's life, but also robbed her of the chance to make a positive impact on the lives of others. Continuing the theme of parental anguish, Bo Cargill, Caitlin's father, wrote a powerful statement that was read aloud during the sentencing hearing. In his letter, Bo expressed the daily torment he endured, haunted by what his daughter had to go through in her final moments. He expressed hope that Jordan would be haunted by his actions every day of his prison sentence. The actions of these teens were not impulsive mistakes. They were cold and calculated crimes. Families were shattered and futures lost. In court, some teens begged for mercy, while others showed no emotion. But justice did not care about their age.